participants. I think that's awesome place to start. This almost feels normal having you give a 3-part series. It's reminiscent of not so long ago.
Back to the pre-corona days.
Yeah, and the Beit Midrash, that was so much fun, and everyone wanted me to bring you back. And Rabbi Freiberg said, bring her back. So we made it happen. Thank you so much. You really don't need an introduction because I see everyone that's here, but just in case I'm missing somebody, Miss Amy Horowitz teaches at Katz Yeshiva High School. She is the favorite, beloved Tanakh teacher up there, all the girls, but she's just their favorite. She's brilliant, she's beautiful, she's fun, articulate, and just a real treat to learn anything and everything from. So Amy, thank you so much for making the time to do this for us again. You're up.
All right, amazing. First of all, it's really my pleasure. And like, you really made it easy by doing it on Zoom. Not that I didn't love coming, but like, it's like, you know, I'm in my own living room here. It's kind of amazing, but I really appreciate everyone joining. So our plan, I don't want to like pressure anyone to come to all 3 parts, but our plan is to spend the next 3 Tuesdays looking at, Lisa, I forgot what we ended up calling the title exactly, so I kind of butchered it up here in the corner. But we're going to look at the 3 different sets of Avot and Imahot, and we're going to take a deeper look at the different relationship dynamics that they each had within their own relationships. And I think, I don't think this is like anything shocking or profound, but I think that we're going to come away with a really interesting understanding that each relationship represents a different paradigm or a different model, and they are just so completely different from one another. And maybe there's a message we can even take away from there, but we'll have to save that for the end of week 3. We definitely can't draw any messages just from week 1. So we're going to focus in order tonight on Avraham and Sarah, next week on Yitzchak and Rivka, and finally on Yaakov and Rachel Leah, because that one's obviously the most complicated. I don't even know like who to put in the title. So tonight our focus is Avraham and Sarah, and we'll start just by reminding ourselves how they meet. So that's in front of us in source 1a. Let me know if you need me to make it bigger, not a knock on anyone's eyesight, just want to make sure everyone can see clearly. I definitely put as much English in as I could, but I'm going to focus on the Hebrew. So Ve'ila told out Terach holid at Avram, at Nachor, at Haran, Haran holid at Lot. So at the end of Parshat Noach, we meet the family of Avram, we meet his family tree. Of course, Avram's father is Terach. Terach has 3 sons, Avram, Nachor, and Haran. And Haran, as we find out, is also the father of Lot. Okay, good to know. We'll come back to that. Vayamat Haran al pnei Terach aviv be'eretz moladato b'ur kasdim. Haran dies in Ur Kasdim. Vayikach Avram v'Nachor lahem nashim. That when Haran dies, that midrashically has to do with the furnace that Avram jumps in and is saved. And Haran says, oh, that was cool. Let me try. And he doesn't have the Amunah that Avram has according to the Medrash, and so he dies. Okay. That means he leaves Lot an orphan. So that's important for the relationship between Avram and Lot that develops, but that's not the relationship we're focused on. So let's keep going. Vayikach Avram v'Nachor lahem nashim. Avram and Nachor, the remaining 2 sons of Terach, each take wives. Shem Eshet Avram Sarai. I might say Avraham by mistake, but I'm trying to just keep it honest here. Shem Eshet Avram Sarai v'Shem Eshet Nachor Milka. So they marry 2 women, Sarai and Milka. Milka is Bat Haran. Milka is the daughter of Avram's deceased brother Haran. Avi Milka, who's the father of Milka, the Avi Yiska, and who's also the father of Yiska. Okay, we're going to stop there because we can already like move on in our discussion. So Avram marries Sarai, and we don't yet, without the help of some mefarshim, we don't yet know exactly who Sarai is. So if we look at Rashi on this spot, Rashi says Yiska, right? Remember, Haran had Lot, and also apparently had a daughter named Milka who marries Nachor, and another daughter named Yiska. And Rashi says very famously, Yiska zu Sarah. Yiska is actually Sarai, Sarah, for one of 3 reasons. Number 1, al shem shesocha beruach hakodesh. Number 1, because the word Yiska could come from the shoresh socha, which means to see or to look. So Rashi contends, the Medrash contends that she could see with ruach hakodesh. She had prophetic vision. Number 1. Number 2, v'shehakol sochin biyofya. Everyone who looked at her could see her great beauty. Remember that? Okay, we're going to need that fact a little bit later on. Ve'od Yiska lashon nesichut, and also the name Yiska comes from a word that means princeliness, princely dignity, it says here in the English, kimo Sarah, which is similar to the name Sarah, lashon srara, which also represents a position of leadership or authority. People named Sarah will tell you, my name means princess. Fair. Doesn't exactly necessarily mean princess. A sar, it can be a prince or really an officer, but it's definitely some type of position of authority. My mother's name is Sarah. We'll go with it meaning princess, right? That's very, very close and a very good definition. So according to Rashi, Avram marries Sarai, who we then find out is his niece, Yiska, right? Daughter of his deceased brother Haran, sister of Lot. And that's the most widely held opinion. Hey, when I teach it to my high school students, I tell them Sarah was Avram's niece. Okay, it grosses them out. They're still young. Okay, they can't even imagine a world that doesn't look exactly like theirs, but we can. So we understand that 4,000 years ago, that was people got married within the family, and it makes sense. And this is very classic Rashi in terms of methodology, because Rashi and the Midrash, I mean Rashi's methodology and the Midrashic methodology, that when you come across a personality in the Torah or name that's mentioned and you don't know exactly who it is, the Midrash is always going to match that unknown anonymous personality with a known personality. That's very typical. When you see Vayar Vehine Ish, the Midrash is going to come along and say, oh, Ish is Gavriel Hamalach because he's called Ish somewhere else. Or very typical, right? There were two troublemakers in the desert. It's got to be Datan and Aviram because we know there were two troublemakers, okay? So very classic methodology of Rashi and the Medrash to find a known personality that makes sense in the context to associate with an unknown personality. So we don't really know who this Yiska is, but says Rashi, based on the Midrash, it's the same person as Sarai. Also very classic of Rashi is big picture. Rashi is going to help us in our pasuk by looking at the big picture. We know later on in the story, when Avram's looking for a wife for his own child, for Yitzchak, he says, it's got to be from the family. So it makes perfect sense that Avram also, that the custom was, or that it's, that it's certainly important to Avram to make sure that he's marrying his child to someone in the family. It makes sense that he himself would marry someone in the family. So that's the classic opinion. Ibn Ezra says something very interesting, just to add to our discussion. Ibn Ezra says, I don't really like this opinion. And he quotes, there's an alternate opinion that Sarah is actually Avraham's sister, not niece. And he doesn't like that opinion either. So let's look at the Ibn Ezra in his own words. He says, ki Sarah hayta achot Avraham einenu yashar be'inai zehatam. I don't like that one so much, says Ibn Ezra. I don't love the idea that he married his sister. Ve'ilu hayakein, because if so, forget any other implications or that's weird or we haven't done that since Cain and Hevel, but like, says the Ibn Ezra, Ve'ilu hayakein, if Sarah was Avram's sister, hayah katuv omer, the Torah would have said, Vayikach terach et Avram beno, v'Sarai bito, eshat Avraham. The Torah would have definitely mentioned when Terach is gathering his family to go on this journey to Haran, that Sarai is Terach's daughter. If she's Avram's sister, then she's also Terach's daughter. Gam kein ilu hayta achot Lot, and even if you want to say, says the Ibn Ezra, that she's Avram's niece, the sister of Lot, hayah katuv omer, that Sarai bat beno. The Torah in a different pasuk would have said, he takes his family and Sarai, his granddaughter, kasher katav al Lot. Lot is mentioned as a grandchild. So Sarai, as an important personality in the ensuing prakim, would also be mentioned in relationship to Terach if she had some type of familiar relationship with him. So Ibn Ezra rejects, we don't have to follow any opinion. It's not halacha, it's parshanut. But everyone goes with Rashi and the Midrash. That's like classic. If you interview like a well-educated man on the street and say, who was Sarah in relation to Avram? Most people are going to say niece. Ibn Ezra says, I don't love the opinion. I really don't like it. I don't think they were related in any way, or certainly not that closely, not a sister, not a niece. If Sarai or Sarah isn't related to Avraham, then how did they meet? And the answer, according to Ibn Ezra, would be, who knows? We don't know. If they were related, then we know how they met. If they weren't related, then we have no idea how they met. And the reason the Torah doesn't tell us how they met is because that's really not important, right? Even though we said, let's start with how they meet, I just want to keep things very parallel, because when we get next week and the week after to Yitzchak and Yaakov and their wives, the way they meet is going to be essential to their story. In the case of Avram and Sarah, according to the Ibn Ezra, and even according to Rashi, it's just not that important. What's important is that they get married. And what's important is not the circumstances of their meeting, but just the fact of their relationship. Here they are, they're married. So now we're going to focus our attention on, well, what's the nature of this relationship? What is there to learn? What is this paradigm that the Torah is presenting? Like option number 1 of 3, what kind of relationship do Avram and Sarah have? And I usually don't start with my main point. I usually build up to it, but I'm going to start here with my main point, and then I'm going to spend the next bit of time trying to prove it, okay? Trying to prove this idea or show some evidence that supports this idea, okay? With the understanding that Shivim Panim La Torah, and there are certainly many ways to approach any topic in the Chumash. Here's what I'm offering you for tonight. So I'm going to suggest to you that the relationship the Torah is presenting to us is not really that romantic. The dynamic between Avram and Sarah is a strong partnership, common goals, common mission, common vision, common agenda, but we don't really see like the flames of a romance between them. We don't get the sense that this is like this loving, warm, not that there's not love, but we definitely don't get the feeling of a romance. And let's start by looking at Rav Hirsch, source number 2. Now, just to be fair, Rav Hirsch is commenting on a much later parak. He's commenting on the story where Avraham tells Avimelech that Sarah is his sister. This happens after Avram tells Paro that Sarah is his sister. And Rav Hirsch is trying to explain, although Rav Hirsch typically is comfortable criticizing the Avot, in this case, he's trying to explain why Avraham would like tell the same lie twice, right? Like he already like lied to Paro that Sarah is his sister, and he kind of got caught, and it got awkward, even though it worked out okay for Avram. And then he goes and does it again. And says Rav Hirsch, what Avram really means is, she was my foster sister before she became my wife. Now, this is based on Rashi's opinion that Sarah is Lot's sister. Their father died following Avraham into the Kivshan Ha'ish, into the furnace. And so she was basically orphaned. Therefore, right, in spirit, she is my sister, the daughter of a brother who died early, and she grew up with me under the same paternal roof. And because we thus became in mind and feeling so sympathetic to each other, she was like a sister to me, and we married. So it's such an interesting piece by Rav Hirsch, because he seems to be pointing out, this isn't like, and then we fell in love and no, she's like a sister to me. We get along well, we get along famously, we're great. We grew up together, we're like great friends. And we're sympathetic in mind and feelings. So we have stuff in common. We grew up kind of with the same values, right? And we were raised in a similar way. We have a lot in common. She was like a sister to me, and we married. Let's just jump ahead to 2020. Not really what most marriages are based on. If your kids come home and say, I met this great girl, she's like a sister to me, I think we're going to get married, there's probably cause for concern, right? That's not typically what we're looking for in a romantic dynamic. But in this case with Avram and Sarah, Rav Hirsch says that their relationship was really brotherly and sisterly. Okay, so not really a romance. Let's keep trying to support this contention that their relationship is like common goals, common vision. We'll see that emerge, but let's start still with the idea that we don't really see like this tremendous romance between them. So let's jump ahead in the story a little bit. Vayhirav ba'aretz, source 3a. So of course, Avram and Sarah and Lot ultimately arrive in Canaan, Lech lecha me'artzecha, and they go. And as soon as they get there and Avram walks the boundaries, Vayhirav ba'aretz, there's a famine in the land. Vayered Avram Mitzrayma lagur sham ki kaved harav ba'aretz. And Avram goes down to Mitzrayim to live there temporarily because there's a terrible famine in the land of Canaan. Vayhi kasher hikriv lavo Mitzrayma. And as Avraham gets closer and closer to Mitzrayim, Vayomer el Sarai ishto, he turns to Sarai, his wife, and he says, Hine na yadati ki isha yafat mare'a. Okay, now I read that unfairly with Rashi's tone already in it. So I recognize that I kind of put Rashi's tone in, but he says to Sarai, I know, hine na, the problem with hine is it's a little bit of an expression of like surprise, like, oh, whoa, you're really pretty. Okay, now, again, typically in a romantic relationship, we assume the husband has noticed the wife's looks already at this point. They've been married, they've traveled, they're like, they've known each other for a while. She may even have grown up in his house. Like, it's a strange thing that he's just noticing or just pointing out her beauty. right? And he says, oh my gosh, you're really pretty. If the Mitzrim also notice your beauty, they're going to say, uh-oh, she's already taken. And because they're going to want you, they're going to kill me. And then they'll keep you alive and marry you, and I'm a goner. Please say you're my sister, so that they'll, treat me well, and also I hope to remain alive. Okay, now, full disclosure, there are many different mefarshim who give many ways to look at Avraham's sudden realization that Sarai is beautiful. To be fair, many say, no, he always knew, he's just now afraid that like others are going to notice. I once read somewhere, now I can't remember where, if anyone has read this and remembers, please tell me, because I've been like trying to find it for years, that, just thinking of the way a beauty from one culture would not necessarily even be noticed in their culture, but when you pluck them out of their own culture and drop them into another culture, the exotic nature of their looks might be so noticeable. So could be, we know Sarah was one of the most beautiful women in the world, according to Chazal, but could be that Avram realizes like, oh my gosh, when the Egyptians see you and you're like, this like totally exotic, Mesopotamian beauty, that they've never seen such a thing before, they're going to go crazy for you. So full disclosure, there is that approach of looking at Avram always knew Sarah was beautiful. He's just looking at her through Egyptian eyes for the first time. But Rashi says something different. Rashi here says, quoting a Midrash Agada, Ad achshav lo hikir ba. He actually had never noticed her beauty before, mitoch tzniut shebishnehem. They were so modest that he never even like really focused on her face. Ve'achshav hikir ba al yadei maaseh. And now all of a sudden something happens. I love when Rashi leaves us like hanging on cliffhanging, right? Something happened. He doesn't tell us what. That's why we need Sifsei Chachamim in source 3b. But something happened, and all of a sudden Avram's like, oh, you're actually really beautiful. Okay, he never paid attention to it. We could interpret that Midrash. We could say that wasn't their focus. Okay, but all of a sudden it seems Avram sees Sarah in a way he's never seen her before. And the Siftei Chachamim explains, Rotzelo Mar Shehaya Ovrim Benahar, they're crossing a river to get down to Egypt. She has to like lift her skirt a little so it doesn't get wet. And he sees like, oh, I don't know, her ankles are very shapely. He sees, oh, she's very attractive. Umidrash agada, alternatively, the Midrash offers, shehikir ba al yadei maaseh, what happens to trigger this recognition that she's so beautiful? Perush ra'a bevo'ah shela, he sees her reflection b'mayim, she'avru derech hamayim, v'ra'a bevo'ah shehayta yafeh ma'ud. So if they were so tsanua that they really didn't like, it even feels funny to say it. They never looked at each other. They never gazed at each other. But if he really had not focused on her physical appearance until now, and of course they didn't have mirrors in their houses, that's a later invention. So they're crossing over this body of water. And by the way, if you've ever been to Hebron, now they're coming from Mesopotamia. I don't know anything about the water sources in Mesopotamia, and they haven't yet settled in Hebron. But when you visit Hebron, the tour guide that takes you there, whoever it is definitely going to point out to you that there's really no natural water source in Hebron except Avram's well. And then they take you to this well that they consider the well of Avraham. And they point out to you, like, there's not like a lot of natural water in Hebron. There's none. The only source is this underground spring. And so you can't see a reflection in an underground spring. It's underground. So I don't know about, Ur Kasdim, and I don't know about Haran, and I don't know about wandering on the journey, but I guess it's possible that this is like the first time they've really crossed or spent time together at a body of water. And so Sifsei Chachamim says, when he sees her reflection, which he can't avoid because he's walking through the same water, he's like stunned by her beauty. Okay, so again, in all fairness, there are other ways to interpret this, but definitely midrashically, Rashi and the Medrash are kind of trying to plant this image in our head of a relationship that's doesn't feel like it's this amazing, strong romance, but it is, he seems to just be noticing the romantic things about her now, okay? Instead of having a romance, and by the way, sorry, it would be impossible for me not to point out that, yes, you want to stay alive, Avraham, but if you're like, desperately in love with your wife and have this like chemistry with her and this attraction to her, it's very strange to try to allow Paro to exploit her sexuality so that you can, I mean, I understand wanting to stay alive, and I have never been in the situation, and people do sometimes whatever they have to stay alive. So I'm not judging Avraham, but we're definitely getting this image like he really treats her like a sister. Okay, I don't know if literally like he's never seen her face, or like, I don't know, if I ask my son, do you think your sister's pretty? He'll be like, I don't know, right? Like, ew, you don't ask that, that's gross. Like, you don't think of your sister that way. So it seems like what the picture that, according to Rashi and the Midrash, the Psukim are presenting to us is this really sisterly, brotherly relationship, which has very little to do with attraction and chemistry and romance. Okay, what does it have to do with? So as I mentioned before, it seems to really be about working together, common goals, common mission, common agenda. So let's look in source 4 and see why I think that's a fair contention. Okay, so if you look at source 4, we have 2 psukim, both from Perek Yud Zayin, 2 different locations, same perek. In the first perek, in the first pasuk, pasuk hey, V'lo yikarei od et shimcha Avram, Avram gets his name changed, v'haya shimcha Avraham, ki av hamon goyim netaticha. Your name is no longer Avram, now it's going to be Avraham because you will be av hamon goyim. Great. Pasuk Tetvav, Vayomer Elokim el Avraham, Sarai ishtecha lo tikra et shema Sarai, ki Sarah shema. Sarai also gets a name change. She goes from Sarai to Sarah. Okay, so they both get a name change. Now we understand that a name change in Tanakh represents a change of status for a specific mission. Okay, so Yaakov gets a name change, and he goes from Yaakov to Yisrael because Yaakov represents an aspect of his life, but Yisrael represents a different aspect of his life that's going to symbolize his mission as the Av of the 12 Shvatim, okay, the father of Am Yisrael. Yehoshua gets a name change. He goes from Hosea to Yehoshua as he's embarking on his mission with the Meraglim, and Moshe says, I have to kind of, like, this is a disaster in the making, and Yehoshua is going to be something different. Yehoshua's job is going to be something special. His role during Chet HaMeraglim is going to be special, and his future role as leader of the Jewish people is going to be something special. So name changes are not, they're not done lightly in the Chumash. And what's unique here, and I know we haven't yet talked about Yitzchak and Rivka and Yaakov and Rachel and Leah, but when Yaakov gets his name changed, his wives don't get their name changed. Yitzchak doesn't get his name changed at all because his status and his mission in life really never changes. Not only does Avram get a name change here, but Sarah gets a name change. And it seems very clear, Sarah's name change is transmitted to her via Avram. It seems very clear when we look at these 2 psukim together that they're both being told, guys, you have a mission to accomplish. Okay, Yaakov, if he has a mission, it's sort of like, not that Rachel and Leah don't play their part, as do Bilhah and Zilpah. They populate Yaakov's family with the tribes. But it seems here that just like Avraham has like a particular agenda, destiny, mission, Sarah also has that particular agenda, destiny, mission. And that's why she needs to get her name changed as well. As Rav Hirsch beautifully says it so much better than I can, just as I blessed you that you shall repeat yourself in your descendants and live on in them, so also do I bless Sarah. To plant a people for himself, God did not only take a man who was to repeat himself in the sons, but also a woman who was to be repeated in the daughters. Accordingly, the same covenant is repeated here with Sarah as had already been promised to Avraham. In other words, weirdly enough, even though Rachel, Leah, Bilhah, and Zilpah are the actual mothers of the Shvatim, we don't really see, other than making the babies, we don't really see them play a role in like the destiny of Am Yisrael, although they are such an integral part. Where here, says Rav Hirsch, Sarai getting her name changed represents, you're in this mission together with Avraham. I need a man and I need a woman. This man is going to be the paradigm of all future Jewish men, and this woman is going to be the paradigm for future Jewish women. Yeah, Lisa. Wait, just unmute. Yeah, there you go.
No, when we had class this morning, we did this Perek Yud Zayin, and we saw that it's a perfect chiastic structure. So it really is fabulous how what's happening to Avram at the beginning of the Perek happens to Sarah at the end of the Perek. It's awesome in one Tuesday to do this Perek and just note that chiastic structure.
Okay,
but perfect. It really does make them very equal. It makes them equal importance and all that stuff. It's very nice.
Yeah, it really makes them equal. Baruch Shekivanti, I didn't know you were doing that, but it really makes them equal.
But we
in terms
weren't.
of-
We were doing Yehoshua, but we just
Oh.
had to throw back to here.
Perfect.
You know,
Okay.
now that I unmuted myself, just one other thing. When you were talking about Siftei Chachamim, you know, he was in Amsterdam. He lived in the 1600s. He had no idea. You're saying you have no idea? You've been to Eretz Yisrael, I don't know how many times, and you have no idea what the water sources look like in Haran and Hebron. Well, I respectfully would guess, nor did he. Okay. Being in Krakow and Poland, I quickly just Googled him, you know, I mean, he had no idea. So, I mean, what he's writing about water sources, I don't know. I'm thinking, with all due respect, it's theoretical, it's ideas, like what it could possibly mean. Because Amy, if you don't know what the water sources are and you've been there on tours, he certainly did not.
Right. So luckily for him, he is generally quoting other sources, and in this case, a midrash. So he's got at least a good leg to stand on. And you're correct. Even as we know from all midrashim, we're really thinking concept, not even if we got a GPS satellite pictures from those days and we saw that there was water everywhere, we could still take the idea from the midrash. But absolutely, yeah, it's a very fair point.
Back to mute. Thanks.
Okay, but please unmute anytime. Jump in. Okay, so we see there is this duality to this mission that, again, I'm not trying to give away the Yitzchak and Rivka, Yaakov and Rachel and Leah part, but we're not going to see that in the same way. There's something very unique about Sarah, that she gets to really play a very equal role in this mission that she and Avraham are sort of being sent on. And what is that mission? So I'm going to suggest the mission has, I'm going to say 2 or 3 parts. We're going to look at 3 parts, but one of them might really be a part B of a different part. Okay, now I just confused myself. So let's just look at it. Okay, so what is this mission? So part 1 of this mission, and probably the most important part, is spreading monotheism in the world. Okay, this is obviously the main thing that Avraham is going to innovate, and it's going to be what he represents. So let's look at the psukim. Vayikach Avram et Sarai ishto vet Lot ben Achiv vet kol rechusham asher rachashu. Avram takes Sarai and Lot and all of his wealth, ve'et hanefesh asher asu b'charan, and all the people that they acquired. Vayetzu lalachet artza Canaan vayavo artza Canaan, and they leave for Canaan and they arrive in Canaan. Now, later, we're gonna read this Rashi, but Rashi also gives an alternate opinion that the nefesh asher asu b'charan, that the people they acquired in Haran, is a reference to their servants. They had a whole household. They had a whole staff. Just gonna give the Dibur Hamatcha a little bold there. Okay, they had a whole staff. But very famously, Rashi says, well, who are these people that they acquired? That's weird. I don't say I'm traveling with my people. I don't have people, I guess. I mean, I'd say I'm traveling with my kids. I don't know, who are these people? Famously, Rashi says, the people shehich nisan tachat kanfei hashchina, the people that they had brought under the wings of monotheism. Avraham megayer et ha'anashim, v'Sarah megayer et hanashim. They had this dual role, right? Their job was to spread monotheism, and they tackled it as a team. Avraham took on speaking and persuading and convincing and philosophizing with the men, and Sarah took that same role in converting and philosophizing and convincing the women. And because they converted all these people to belief in Hashem, the pasuk credits them as if these are people that they made. Okay, I'm less interested in the making of people because this is not a parshanut of Sefer Breshit question, but just thinking about this, this mission that they share, this agenda that they share, Rashi's clearly following that logic here in source 6b. Yes, their mission is to spread monotheism. Avram, you got this half. Sarah, you got this zone, right? We're going to take our zones. You got the men, I got the women. We're going to thereby convert as many people as possible. Okay, so part 1 of their mission, spreading monotheism. This is the possible part 2, or we could view it as part of spreading monotheism. The second thing they sort of set out to do is, and I'll explain why this might be a separate mission in a second, is hachnasat orchim. Okay, now we could say, well, that was part of their spreading monotheism. No better way. We know this, whether, I don't know, this is, Kiruv organizations are great at this. Chabad, NCSY, they're great at this, right? Elisha Hanavi was great at this. Feed their souls, feed them, bring them in, show them the warmth and hospitality, and you got them. Right? We have personalities that we know who are successful in Kiruv and successful in bringing people really closer to Hashem and closer to Torah because of their warmth and personality that they display. So it could be that their Hachnasat Orchim is part of their mission to spread monotheism. I'm totally comfortable with that. But I'm also comfortable suggesting that it may have even been in some way an independent mission. Remember, they didn't have the Torah, so they didn't have Taryag Mitzvot to share with their newfound converts, but they did have this concept that their style of moral living was going to be something different than what everyone else did. And we know Sodom was obviously unique, but we know from Sodom, which is sort of presented as the foil to Avraham, that Chesed and Hachnasat Orchim was not the norm. They were the opposite of Machnise Orchim. So Avraham, perhaps as part of a separate mission, Avram and Sarah are trying to represent like a whole new type of morality, and Hachnasat Orchim is like a symbol of that new type of morality. So could be part of spreading monotheism, could be its own mission, right? Avram, you got to spread monotheism, Avram and Sarah, and you have to show people a different way of living. You have to be like this something else. You have to be that Ivri, that Me'ever HaNahar. You're on, everyone else is doing one thing, you're doing something else. You have to be that iconoclast. That's part of what your mission is, because you're representing like a whole new way of living to the people that are going to follow your path and believe in Hashem. So let's see, where do we see them embarking on this mission? And in particular, where do we see them joining together to embark on this mission? Because our premise again is Avram and Sarah were like a real team. They had a mission together. It wasn't like, oh, he had a mission and she happened to help him behind the scenes or vice versa. This mission was, they were both charged with it. That's why he gets a name change, she gets a name change. So where do we see this Hachnasat Orchim? So it's a beautiful scene when Avraham is waiting by his tent and the three men, angels, but he sees them as men, approach. Vayamaher Avraham ha'ohela el Sarah. Avram runs to the tent to Sarah, Vayomer, and he says, Mahari shlosh siim kemach, so let lushi ve'asi ugot. Hey, you got the cake? Ve'el habakar ratz Avraham. I got the steak. Okay? Vayikach ben bakar rach vatov, vaytein al hanar vayameher la'asototo. Don't you get the feeling they've done this like a million times? He's like, you're on, go, it's go time. She's like, all right, I'm making the dough. Like, she knows what to do. He knows what to tell her. She does the baking. He does the grilling, right? Like, it's a perfect partnership. And you totally get the sense when you read these psukim that this is the millionth time they've done it. Okay, we know their tent was open on all four sides. We know that Avram's feeling the lack of visitors, which means he's used to feeling the presence of visitors. This is something they've done a million times before. They got this down to a science. Okay, this is clearly like a plan that they're like, all right, Sarah, activate the plan. And they do it. She knows exactly what to do. He knows exactly what to do, and they feed their visitors. So mission number one, spread monotheism. Mission number two, demonstrate with your own actions a better way of living, an elevated way of living, as opposed to the culture in Sodom, which we can, again, Sodom was obviously unique and extreme because Sodom and Amorah get destroyed. But the culture, let's assume, was not like inviting guests was not like the thing. Okay, in Sodom, they like abused their guests. That's obviously an extreme, but let's even say, so the natural default position of the people in Canaan was like, guests, it wasn't a thing. They didn't abuse them, but they didn't go out of their way for them. And Avram's supposed to set a completely different tone. So that's mission number two. Now let's look at mission number three, because none of the other missions are going to matter unless mission number three exists. And mission number three is Jewish continuity. They have to have a next generation. Like, this is the main thing, because you can be a monotheist, but if your values die with you, it's not going to mean anything to the world. And you can show the world this elevated morality and better way of living, Hachnasat Orchim, but if you don't have anyone to pass that value on to, and clearly it's not Lot, because he messes up big time with Chesed, okay, with Hachnasat Orchim. So if you don't have anyone to pass it on to, your values at the end of the day, just don't have the impact that Hashem wants Avram and Sarah's value to have. So Jewish continuity is probably going to be the most important part of the mission. And I want to share such a beautiful idea. I love this kliyakar. Like, I have a terrible memory. I have to write everything down, but some things stick with you because they make a real impact. And this one has always stuck with me. So let's look. So when these men come, right, and they have a message for Avram, Vayomru Elav, and they say to Avram, Aye Sarah Ishtecha, where's Sarah, your wife? Vayomer Hine Ba'ohel. And he says, oh, she's in the tent. Now, the natural follow-up would be, okay, good, because we wanted to tell you something private, or, oh, bring her out here because we wanted to tell her. The message is about to be, you're going to have a child. Okay, the message the angels are about to relate is the news of Yitzchak. But these men ask Avram, where's Sarah? And he says in the tent, and then the conversation shifts. There's no follow-up there. There's no like, oh, okay, well, we really want her to hear, or oh, we really don't want her to hear. Okay, if I come over to your house and I go, where's your, I don't know, where's your husband, where's your wife? So I either want them to be there or I don't want to be there. I'm not just asking to be polite. If that's a strange question. And these angels aren't just asking to be polite. That's not going to be included in the Torah. So Kli Yakar has a fabulous Peirush here, but what I have to do first is I have to make this word a lot bigger. And let's see if I can do it. It's really hard on Sefaria, but it's going to work. There we go. Okay. So if you look at the word Vayomru Elav, and they say to him, you notice dots on top of the word. Okay. Now I happened to give a shir last night about Yaakov and Esav's reunion, and we got to the word Vayishakehu, also dots. So I'm like living in the dot mode right now. Okay. Dots over the word. And let's look at the Kli Yakar, because he's focused on the meaning of these dots, and he's quoting a midrash, but he explains the midrash so beautifully that we're gonna read his version and not the original midrash version. He says, "V'chazal amru shenakud al aleph yud vav." Okay, now it happens to be there's a little dot over the lamed here also. I had this issue with Vayishakehu, and I actually looked in a Torah because I was like, one second, Siftei Chachamim says there's no dot on the shin. I opened the Torah, there is a dot on the shin. I was confused. Okay, but let's follow the train of thought of the midrash, and then I will follow up, I promise, and worry about how can the midrash say there's no dot on the lamed if there's clearly we're looking at one. Right now we have Sefaria open, not an actual Torah, so I'm not that worried, but I will look tomorrow and I will double check what's happening with the lamed. Okay, so v'chazal amru shenakud al ayo aleph yud vav lefisha sha'alu gam lesara ayo. Because at the same time that they ask Sarah, Aye, where is he? They ask Avram, Aye, where is she? Sorry, just killed it. They also ask Sarah, Ayo, where is he? Okay, now it's a ridiculous question because he's standing right in front of them. What's going on here? They're asking, where's Sarah, but they don't really care. And they're asking Sarah, where's Avraham, when he's standing right in front of them. So this cannot be a literal question. They're not asking what are the GPS coordinates of Avram and Sarah at this moment, because they literally can see Avram and Sarah standing in front of them. That's a ridiculous question. Vidorshe reshumot amru ki elav aye heim otot eleha ayo. If you really want to get into gematria, vayomru elav aye is the same exact anagram letters of vayomru eleha ayo. If you switch the vav and the hey in the two words, I'll do it here. Okay, we'll get this back to normal. I don't know what it was at. Let's go with 12. Okay, that looks good. Okay, but it actually was 11, I can tell. But if you switch the vav and the hey here at the ends of the two words, they asked him, where is she? And they asked her, where is he? Okay, cute play on words. Valza kasha, says the Kli Yakar. 1 second. What's this medrash? Eich sha'alu l'Sara ayo. Why would they ask Sarah, where is he? V'halo Avram haya omeid alehem. Avram's literally right there. Okay, he asks our question. And also he doesn't ask, but implied in the question is, and also they don't seem to care where Sarah is. They're just asking, like, what's the follow through? Al-Kain says the Kli Yakar libi omer. Therefore, he says, I really feel, she'elat aye ve'ayo, eina she'ela mikomit. It's not asking about their physical location, lomar efa hu ohi, ela she'elat hamadregot. Where are they, like in life? Like, where are they holding? Ki lashon makom more al hamadrega. Okay, he says the word makom can mean place, station, level. Where are you? V'lo sha'alu klal be'eze makom huohi, ela sha'alu al makom madregatam uma'alatam be'inyan ma'aseh hamatovim. Where are you with your mitzvot? Now I'm going to give you an alternate approach, but this is the Kli Yakar's approach. Where are you with your zichuyot, with your merit, with your mitzvot? Asher ba'avuram yizku shnehem laben. Like, where are you holding? Because, like, in order to have a child, remember mission, Jewish continuity, you have to, like, you're asking God for a big miracle here. You're old and you're way past the time of childbirth. So, like, do you deserve it? Like, where are you holding with your good deeds? Ki he's, and what's the answer? Hine ba'ohel. Ki he zachta leben ba'avor shehitznua, says the Kli Yakar. Her merit was that she was tsanua, she was a modest woman. Hine ba'ohel. She's ba'ohel, doesn't mean literally in the tent, but she's modest. And And he also, the answer is hine ba'ohel. He's also in the tent, whereas for her it meant sniut. For him it means hachnasad orchim, because he does that in his tent. Okay, we can stop reading there. I want to share a different idea with you. I like
This is beautiful. It's like opposite to like Avraham, like Adam Rishon Ayeka or Cain
Yeah.
also.
Yeah,
The same idea. Like he used it for chesed. Adam used to get feeling to bring Gan. Beautiful.
exactly.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
it's such a beautiful idea, and thank you. And I'm going to share. I want, again, I read this somewhere. I don't remember where, it was years ago, but it made a big impact on me. If you've ever come across it, reminds me where. That they're not looking for this, that the angels aren't saying, are you worthy of having a child, hine ba'ohel? But I love this idea that Avram and Sarah for so long, for so many years, have been focused outward, converting people, bringing in people. They've really been focused on their work. And the angels are like, listen, it's time to like worry about Jewish continuity. So God wants to give you a child, but you got to be focused now on raising that child. Your focus has been so out in the world, like doing your kiruv and doing your job and hachnasad orchim, and like you're so busy. But if you're gonna have a child, you can't just like have the baby and then go back to work. Like you really have to focus now on raising that child, because you want that child to carry your values. I'm gonna let you talk in 1 second. That's the hine ba'ohel. Where are you focused? Avram says in the ohel. Sarah says in the ohel. When they're both focused inward on their family and on their ohel, then Hashem says, now you can begin building that family. Lisa, go ahead.
So I checked into Torahs, and there are no dots over the lamed, so
Okay.
that's good.
Phew.
Few. Okay. Number 2, I happen to have 6 first cousins that are all Chabad. They're all rabbis and everything, and all of them have said over COVID that they're redoing their life now, because they were stuck at home and they saw, wow, and they're, when everything opens up a little bit, how they were going to go and do things a little bit differently, and realize that they had to focus more at home and like temper the kiruv a little bit. And it was very interesting
amazing.
that all 6 of them, they're all shlichim in different states, and it was such an interest, so similar to what you're saying here. It's very, very nice.
That's beautiful. That's a beautiful idea. I remember thinking, like, going into chinuch, like I worried about this issue, like I was a teacher before I was a mother. So like I had my students over every second, and I went to every sports game. And I remember in having my kids, like, I'm worried because I don't want to stop giving to my students, but like, I don't also want to be that mom in chinuch who, like, her kids get schlepped along and kind of come second. And so it's a real fear. And so I think that's really interesting, that this idea, again, I wish I could credit it to the right person, but that this idea really is a real feeling, not only, for the Chabad cousins, but for someone in chinuch, for someone in the rabbinate. Like, your focus is so much of the time on your job, in many jobs. And you want to make sure that your children, don't suffer the brunt of that. And these angels seem to want to make sure that Avram and Sarah are prepared emotionally. Like, your focus now, guys, has to be on the kid, because if this kid is going to represent Jewish continuity, then he really has to absorb your values. He can't be an outsider. He has to be an insider. And so you have to be focused ba'ohel. And when they both say ba'ohel, the angels say, awesome, you're ready to fulfill your mission of Jewish continuity together. Okay. Now this,
sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
Also, about the Akedat Yitzchak, where you can't really sacrifice your kids. So it's funny how, like, one of my rabbis said that you can't, like, sacrifice your kids, and then it's about Avraham and Yitzchak. So, like, it's funny how the Malachim are saying that, are you actually ready for the kid? And then a million years down the line, they say, okay, fine, wait, don't sacrifice your kid. It's cool.
Beautiful. I love that you brought that up, and I'm gonna mention the Akedat Yitzchak briefly, but you're right. It's got to be mentioned here, because we're saying good job. It definitely deserves a high five. Okay, good. So we're gonna mention Akedat Yitzchak, because if we're talking about you have to be focused, and then all of a sudden they're like, the mission is Jewish continuity, now sacrifice your kid, that's not gonna fly. So we're definitely gonna bring that up momentarily. But first we have to bring up something else, which is the relationship between Avraham and Hagar. And the reason we have to bring that up is because if the mission is Jewish continuity, so Avram and Sarah do something interesting. So first, Sarah insists that Avram marry Hagar. Then she forces him to send Hagar away. What's going on? Okay, so Rav Hirsch explains Sarah and Avram actually initially misunderstood the mission. They initially misunderstood the mission. What's the misunderstanding? So Sarah initially thinks the mission is Jewish continuity. If it's not going to happen with me, then I better get Hagar involved so that Avraham can have a baby. Now, this is fascinating. Okay, and if you look at Rav Hirsch here, source 9, I'm not scrolling too far up because I don't want to give away source 10 yet. Okay, but if you look at source 9, this is the best thing about doing it on Zoom. I'm like in total control. He did it for her sake as she did it for his. Now, remember, our contention tonight is these guys were like a team. You've never met a team like Avram and Sarah. Every mission that they took on together. They were maybe more brotherly and sisterly than romantic, but their relationship was not founded on romance or attraction, but it was founded on common mission, common goals, common values, common purpose. He did it for her sake, meaning marrying Hagar, as she did it for his, a relationship that we find repeatedly between Avraham and Sarah. Sarah could feel that by making this sacrifice to give Hagar as a wife to Avraham, she was more than ever Avraham's wife. So she's like, listen, if the mission is continuity, like you got to go for it with Hagar. And he's like, I don't want to, but I do want the mission. And so they decide, I'm going to make the sacrifice for her. She's going to make the sacrifice for him. Beautiful. Says Rav Hirsch, where did they go wrong? This is brilliant. Love this line. It's one line. They went wrong because this is what they misunderstood. To plant a people of God, the right fathers and mothers must be one. Avraham's must find Sarah's and not unite themselves to Hagar's. Meaning their misunderstanding is Sarah doesn't realize the role she needs to play in fulfilling the mission of Jewish continuity. She sees like it's Avraham's mission. She should have come to this shir. Because if she would have come to this shir, she would have understood, one second, Sarah, you got your name changed. Like you do everything with Avraham. This has to be the two of you. As we mentioned with Rav Hirsch before, Avram's going to be the paradigm for all future Avrahams, and Sarah's going to be the paradigm for all future Sarahs. It cannot happen with Hagar. Hagar and Avraham can have children, for sure, but Hagar and Avraham can't have Jewish continuity. Because in order for Jewish continuity to happen, Avraham's must be united with Sarah's. She's essential to this mission as she's essential to every other mission. And Sarah doesn't realize this right away. When does she realize it? This is fascinating. She realizes it when she sees Yishmael's behavior. Vatere Sarah et ben Hagar hamitzrit asher yalda la'Avraham mitzachek. Very famous. Sarah notices. It's the best thing about Zoom. I forgot I could do it. I can like highlight stuff. It's best. Okay. So she sees Yishmael, the son of Hagar and Avraham, mitzachek. Now here, the English is very kind. He's playing. Okay. Rashi, not so kind. Rashi says, what is this play? What is this midah? By the way, Sarah and Avraham also were known for being mitzachek, and Yitzchak, ironically, is named Yitzchak. So laughter is a very interesting undertone, of course, in this family. But when Yishmael does it, says Rashi, there's something very wrong with it. What is very wrong with it? Okay, sorry, I just want to point out before we look at what's wrong with it. When she sees Yishmael mitzachek, she says, he's got to go. Now, we would assume, because we're not Sarah, that she just doesn't want Yishmael around Yitzchak. He's getting in the way. The question of inheritance is getting cloudy or muddy or blurry, and like it's like not a good thing. Rashi says that's not what's going on here. Sarah's not a jealous mama. She's not a mama bear who's protecting her child. She might also be, but that's not what's going on in this pasuk. What's going on? Also very well-known Rashi. Says Rashi, what does the word mitzachek represent? And he explains and he gives proof in each case that it represents the three sins that are antithetical to Jewish values: avodah zarah, gilui arayot, and shvichut damim, murder, idolatry, and adultery. Right? He says, Rashi says, when Sarah sees that Yishmael poses a challenge to the mission, who cares that he is bothering her son? That's too bad. Okay, she's, I'm sure, upset about that. But that's not what puts her over the edge to expel and exile Yishmael from the house. What puts her over the edge is, oh my gosh, one second. The child created by the union of Avraham and Hagar is not mission appropriate. Only the child that is created by Avraham and Sarah, as Rav Hirsch pointed out, is going to carry on the mission. This was my job, said Sarah. I didn't realize. I thought maybe Ishmael is going to be the one. Like, okay, maybe the point was populate the world with children. When she sees Yishmael not being mission true, she says, oh, I get it. We don't need a lot of children. We need the right children. Okay, we don't need a lot. That's not what God meant when he said Av Hamon Goyim. True, ultimately that will happen, and Avram again will go on and marry Keturah and have 6 more kids. So he will fulfill the bracha of having many. That wasn't the mission of Avram and Sarah. That was Avram's bracha. That's so nice. The mission, you got to have the right kind of child. And it's Yitzchak who is, and Yishmael poses a challenge to that. He poses a real obstacle to that mission carrying out, and you know, Yishmael not getting in the way of Yitzchak understanding the true, you know, nature of his purpose in life. So when she realizes that, she realizes the role she plays. Oh, Avram and I are on a mission here, and it's Yitzchak that needs to be. And by the way, remember when she says, get rid of this kid, and Avram says, but I don't want to, Hashem says, listen to Sarah. Not because the women are always right, and not because she was a greater Navi than he was, maybe, but because Avraham loses sight for a minute of the mission as well. When Sarah says, oh my gosh, Avram, no, I just realized we got to focus on Yitzchak, even Avram even wavers, and he goes to Hashem, and Hashem says, no, she's right. You have to focus on your mission. You have to focus on Yitzchak. So not that it's not an emotional scene, it is an emotional scene, but the emotion really is, the bigger issue than the emotion is, can we stay focused on our agenda, on our mission, on our goal? Okay. By the way, this is now when I'll bring up the Akedah, okay, Akedat Yitzchak. This might explain her reaction to Akedat Yitzchak, because she's so now into the mission of Jewish continuity that when she hears word that Avram sacrificed Yitzchak, it's not that she doesn't have the emunah that he has. She would have done it also had Hashem asked her to. But like, she now became like her like one-track mind is Jewish continuity, because we can't, our mission of spreading monotheism and our mission of Hachnasat Orchim doesn't matter if we don't have a Yitzchak to pass it on to. And when she thinks for a second that Yitzchak is gone and he has never gotten married and had his own children, like she can't bear the idea that the mission won't be fulfilled. Okay, and that might be why her reaction, according to the Midrash, of course, is to die. Okay, she's of shock. Okay, we could say heartbreak, we could say a lot of things. She doesn't have the emunah. She also, it could be just everything she's worked for, she sees sort of disappearing before her eyes in this one action of Avram. Okay, so very last piece of our puzzle is to focus on Sarah's death. Now remember our contention. This is a team, this is a partnership, this is not a romance per se. Love, yes. Romance, no. Okay, that was my contention at the beginning. So let's look at the final like piece of evidence. So Sarah dies after hearing that news of Akedat Yitzchak. Vatamat Sarah, or after Akedat Yitzchak. Vatamat Sarah bekiryat arba Hebron be'eretz Canaan. Vayavo Avraham lispod la Sarah ve'liv kota. Sarah dies in Hebron, in the lands of Canaan, and Avraham eulogizes and mourns Sarah. And we probably all know that kaf in the word liv kota is small. Again, the power of technology and font sizes, but it's even small in an actual Torah. Okay, what's with the small kaf? So the Baal HaTurim, it's very painful to read, says kaf ketana. It's a small kaf. Shelo bacha ela ma'at. He didn't mourn that much. Lefisha zekena haita. It was her time. Okay, now her time or not her time. My Zadie passed away when he was 97. My Baba at that time was 94. She cried a lot. Okay, she still cries and asks every day where he is. So we're not minimizing sadness because, oh, okay, it's time, right? That's not a realistic approach necessarily from our emotional 2020 perspective. Again, I always tell my students, but we can't apply our 2020 perspective because our values and culture and norms are different. But the Baal HaTurim is saying he really only cried a little. That's painful to read, okay? Chizkuni joins in and says, why is he only crying a little? He's not really crying over her death. He's crying lefi shelo hayalo makom muchan likvura. He's like upset and frustrated because he hasn't found a burial plot for her and he wants to bury her. Now, that's definitely out of love for her, out of respect for her, okay? But our mafarshim seemed, and even that small kaf, seemed to be, again, anytime there's dots over the word or a small letter or a big letter or a missing letter, something, the Torah is calling our attention to something. We might normally not pay attention to the word v'liv kota, because like, okay, he cried, of course, duh. But when there's a small kaf, we're like, oh, 1 second, what's with the crying? Baal HaTurim says, well, he didn't cry very much. And the Chizkuni says, well, he cried, but not really over the loss of Sarah, but over the inability to bury her properly and hasn't yet secured a place in the land. And finally, when he, so again, you know, they have a very strong relationship. That much is clear. They literally, I'm actually going to end on this note. I see the time. As soon as he's done burying her, Avram refocuses one final time on his mission. Because if the mission is Jewish continuity so that the monotheism and the Hachnasat Orchim can pass to the next generations of Jews, so he's got to find a wife for Yitzchak. That has to be the next thing that he does. And that, I'm going to suggest to you, is because he realizes his time, he's not going to die yet, but his moment of being the carrier of this mission has to be over, because he cannot do his mission without Sarah. Remember, they've been a team. Every time, like, they got charged with their mission in the same moment. Your name's Avraham, her name's Sarah. Now go do your mission. Okay, the name change represents a change in purpose. And so once they got that together, literally 10 seconds apart in almost the same exact moment, they've been doing this together. You've never met a team like Avram and Sarah. And so when she dies, his mission is over. He can't do it without her. He's never done it without her. And so it's time to pass the torch. And so he does. That's the reason. I mean, there are other reasons. Yeah, he realizes he's getting old. He realizes Yitzchak's getting old. Akedah was a close brush with death. He wants to make sure there's another generation. But also, like, his life isn't over, but his story is over. Because his story is integrally tied with Sarah being by his side. And when she's no longer able to be by his side, we're really done with our focus on Avraham. And we're ready to pass the torch to the next generation. And that's what we're going to do next week when we look at and explore the relationship between Yitzchak, our next generation, and his wife, as they build a marriage and a relationship in an effort to continue this mission of Jewish continuity.